All right, welcome back to Talking Ball with Pat Leonard here on the Believe Network on Super Bowl Radio Row in New Orleans. We are brought to you by, gotta grab another bag, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. We're also brought to you by Salaretta for Men and Estate 98 Coffee, as well as My Bookie Sportsbook. And we are here with none other than Greg Cosell, executive producer and analyst at the NFL Matchup Show and senior producer at NFL Films for 45 years, also co-author of The Games That Changed the Game. Greg.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
All right, Pat. Good seeing you.
Great seeing you too. And, we always want to dip into the well of knowledge that you have, especially around this time of year when it comes to the draft. And let's get right into it in New York. The Giants hold the number 3 overall pick, Greg. And the question is, does a team that's desperate in need of a quarterback, is there a quarterback that's good enough, worthy enough for that number 3 overall pick? I know you prefer to stay in the player assessments evals, but do you feel strongly, let's say, about a Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders?
I've done 3 quarterbacks in detail that I'm done with at this point, and I've watched probably 20 plus games of each of them. So 3, I've done Cam Ward, I've done Sanders, and I've done Jaxson Dart.
Okay, how do they stack up?
Those 3, to me, I would say that Ward would easily be my number 1 of those 3. And I do think that Ward is worthy of a top pick. I really like his game. Again, I don't know the players, and obviously with a quarterback, you have to have a feel for them as a person and a lot of other things that go into quarterback play, toughness. Although I do know some people out at Washington State, and Louis Riddick, who I know well, has I think done 4 games with Cam Ward over the last 4 years, and I've heard nothing but great things about him. The word I keep hearing is he's a dog and he's highly accountable. So, those are real positives. But to me, Cam Ward, based on just solely tape, without those other things, which I'm hearing from other people, I think Ward really looks like a good prospect to me.
And then how about Sanders and Dart? Because they seem to be stacking up as QB 2 and 3.
Yeah, Sanders, to me, I think he throws a good ball. I think he sees it pretty well. He's not very big. He's got a good arm, not a big arm, but he can make the throws. I think he throws it well on the run. He's got a lot of sort of details and nuances that he needs to work out. He tends to, when he feels pressure, he tends to retreat backwards. He doesn't have a great pocket feel. He's tough in the terms of if there's pressure coming right at him, he'll stand and deliver. But if he has to start moving around the pocket, he doesn't have a great pocket feel. So there's good things about Sanders. I think he would need to develop over time. And again, this is the tough part of evaluating quarterbacks, Pat, as you know, is I think there's things that clearly need to be worked on for him to be a quality NFL starter, but he certainly could be that in 2 or 3 years. I would not say, oh, my God, this guy can't play. He does throw a good ball. I just think he's going to have to, develop an understanding of what it's like to play in the league, which is different than playing in college, obviously. So, I don't see him. And unless, of course, look, Brian Dable could look at Sanders and say, I can make this kid into a great quarterback, and that's the way coaches think. That. I mean, it's coaches look at quarterbacks and think, how does he fit in my system? How do I teach him?
No doubt.
So there's no question. Dart, I don't think Dart would be seen or should be seen as a top 5 or top 10 pick. I think he'll be more in the eye of the beholder. There's things to like about Dart. I think he throws pretty good ball. He's not a gun thrower by any means. He's a good athlete. He's probably a better athlete than people give him credit for. His running will be a factor. His ability to scramble and get first downs like that will be a factor. But I think overall traits, you just wouldn't put him in that category.
Yeah.
But again, I think if he's well coached, good scheme, people around him, you start getting into those things with quarterbacks there's very few transcendent quarterbacks. So they need people. I think Dart could be a quality starter in this league, but I think he needs all those other things in place for that to happen.
Okay. Coming off the last 2 years where not every quarterback picked high has been a hit, but at the number 2 pick the last 2 years, C.J. Stroud,
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels, both legit, immediate franchise guys. Still have things to work on. You see Stroud's offensive coordinator gets fired this year. But you're talking about guys who have immediately changed their teams. And then even a Bo Nix, who he pairs with
Right.
Sean Payton, and any other year ends up would have been the offensive rookie of the year,
Sure.
most likely. Can Giants and NFL fans expect high quarterback draft picks to continue to have that kind of immediate success? Is the game set up for these young men to come in and make that impact better than they have been in the past? Or are we just talking about a couple of individual talents and fits that have made that possible, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think so much depends on coaching and where they go. I mean, I know people because of what happened this past year, although I don't think Caleb Williams, despite numbers, had a very good year. And I've talked to a lot of people who don't believe he had a very good year either, despite the fact that he only threw 6 or 7 interceptions and I think 20 touchdowns. So the numbers look pretty good. Obviously, Daniels had a good year. From the tape I saw of Drake May, I thought he had a good year. Nix is a great example of a quarterback that in some ways like Dart, although he's a better thrower than Dart, is in the eye of the beholder. He went to a great coach with a great scheme and an understanding of that style of quarterback. So I think so much is dependent on that. So it's case by case. I mean, I know people probably think now because of what happened last year that, hey, if the Giants, whoever drafts a quarterback high, that, oh, he's got to be really good right away.
Right.
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can take a little time. You know, you mentioned C.J. Stroud, and I know they made it to the second round of the playoffs, but he struggled a bit this year. It was not the same. And the easy answer is the O-line wasn't as good. That's the easy answer. You know, I obviously studied Stroud in great detail, and there are some things that he needs to continue to develop to really continue to ascend. You know, he started to struggle a bit this year when there were bodies around him. He just wasn't the same quarterback. So, he has to work on that. He has to work on being able to sort of stay with his fundamentals and his mechanics and when there are people around him, because there's more people around you in the NFL than in college. And yeah, sure, did the offensive line play a part? Yes, but that's the way it is. You still have to go out there and play quarterback. No one cares, that the offensive line wasn't as good. That becomes irrelevant. So, and I really like Stroud. I mean, I think he throws a beautiful ball, but his accuracy, because he started to play a little too fast. Maybe he was anticipating pressure. Maybe he was perceiving it when it wasn't quite what pressure is by NFL standards. He started to miss some throws that as a rookie he never missed because he was so precisely accurate. So every quarterback goes through some ups and downs early in their careers.
How do you feel about Bryce Young? Seemed like
Yeah.
down the stretch of this season, he started to come on and show some of that number 1 pick talent.
Yeah, and he's a classic case. Look, it's not his fault he was drafted number 1, but Bryce Young is a classic example of a guy that's an executor and a ball distributor. So he needs the offensive line, particularly the interior of the O-line, to be effective. He needs a run game. He needs quality receivers. Because he's drafted number 1, people expect him to be the kind of guy that elevates everybody. He's not that guy. He's a piece. But, because he's number 1, you know how that works. So he got better as the season progressed because the run game was a factor. Hubbard had a really good season. I think he might have gained 1,000 yards or right there.
Sounds right.
The O-line started to play better in the interior. He needs, the interior of the O-line controls the depth of the pocket. He needs the depth of the pocket to be really solid because he can't just sit on his back foot and drive the ball. He's not a guy with a big arm. He's got to be allowed to play with timing and rhythm, get the ball out. And that happened more in the second half of the season. But he's a piece of an offense. And by the way, you can be really good doing that. There's a lot of guys that are like that are good players. But because he was drafted number 1, he's not going to be Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to be that guy.
Okay. So you said something earlier, too, that I want to come back to that interested me about Caleb Williams, that it was clear he did not have a good first NFL season. Seemed like you were alluding to there are some concerns about things that he needs to clean up. Can he clean them up as a player, even with a new offensive coach in Ben Johnson? How do you view his game, his shortcomings, what he can improve on, and maybe what is concerning to not just you, but also the people around the league who kind of share the same opinion?
It's funny you asked that because when Tom Brady does a game, to me, he's a really good listen. And he said something a number of weeks ago, and I've believed this for the most part. But when he said it, of course, it made me think, hey, maybe I know what I'm talking about once in a while, you know. But he said that sacks are on the quarterback, and 99% of sacks are on the quarterback. Fans think sacks are on the O-line, and Caleb Williams, and teams have done these studies because I've talked to GMs that have done these studies. I don't have that time. I'm one person.
Yeah.
But quarterbacks that get sacked a lot in college tend to get sacked a lot in the NFL. They've done these studies. And Williams was sacked over 80 times in his 2 years at USC.
Wow.
And obviously he's a guy with great mobility. So think about the fact that he was sacked over 80 times
Yeah.
at USC. So this year he was sacked. I think he was the most sacked quarterback in the league, if memory serves me correctly. And, you know, sacks are a high percentage are on the quarterback. And he's got to figure that out. He's got to figure out how to play in the pocket. And he throws a beautiful ball. I mean, you just watch this kid throw a ball. It comes out so sweet. But he's got to learn in many ways how to play the quarterback position at the NFL level. And we'll see how that develops.
Yeah, I wonder, like you said, the O-line's not an excuse for any quarterback, really. But I know people that I talked to, watched him play, said that he became this year a lot of like one read and bail if it wasn't their guy. And that he did it so often, it felt like that was actually the process he had fallen into,
and that's
concern.
fair. And again, you know, I think when your O-line isn't great, sure, there is a tendency to start perceiving pressure and anticipating pressure. But you have to get past that. Now, again, he could easily get past. I'm not saying he'll never get past it.
Right.
He could start being a great player this year. Ben Johnson is one of the best designers of route concepts and combinations. He's unbelievable with his spacing of routes, which really present clear and defined reads for the quarterback. That will really help Caleb Williams. And as I said, he throws a beautiful ball. So he could easily take a big step forward. And he's one guy I'm very anxious to see this year because of that. But if he starts getting sacked a lot again this year, then we know that the problem is him.
Great breakdown. All right, so a few sponsor segments first. Brought to you by Boom Chaga. It's Here Comes the Boom. So now we're turning our attention to the Super Bowl, Eagles Chiefs here, Greg. Which non-obvious player will make the biggest boom impact in this game? So not Saquon, not Mahomes, not Jalen Hurts, somebody a little bit more under the radar.
Can I give you two? Is that allowed?
Please, bonus.
Milton Williams, the defensive tackle opposite Jalen Carter, who's had a phenomenal season, but probably overlooked by a lot of people.
Yeah.
And Justin Reed for the Chiefs, who is a really good safety and a major part of their pressure packages situationally. And Steve Spagnuolo uses his defensive backs in his pressure schemes better than any defensive coordinator in the NFL.
I love it. All right. And also brought to you by Sal Loretta for Men. This is the Look Good, Play Good segment. Greg, sometimes
the Look Good segment doesn't work for me. So that's all right.
I'll ask like NFL players, who's your best dressed teammate? But for you, I would ask you, when you look at the postseasons the Chiefs and the Eagles have had, which player jumps out to you as somebody who has looked particularly on his game? It could be, you just gave me two guys who have had good postseasons, but a guy who has just maybe even looked better than he has in the regular seasons.
Maybe a name. And again, I didn't know you were going to ask me this, so it's just a name that popped into my head.
That's the idea.
Yeah, George Karlaftis.
Oh.
I think George Karlaftis is a really intriguing player for the Chiefs D-line because he gets a lot of one-on-ones. Now, we know the Eagles O-line is arguably the best in football. I think they're the best run-blocking D-line, O-line in football. But Karlaftis has been a really major factor in the Chiefs. You know, Chris Jones is an obvious guy. He's a great player.
Yeah.
But I think Karlaftis has to be somewhere along the line a factor in this game.
All right. And finally, my bookie presents Pat's Pick. Greg, who's going to win the Super Bowl and why?
Well,
on the spot.
I've been asked a lot, so I have an answer. I've picked the Eagles to win 31-27. And I guess, I've never, as you know, Pat, I never have great conviction in these kinds of picks. But I just can't get over that O-line. It's over 1,700 pounds. It's so good. So I just feel like at some point in a game that I anticipate to be competitive and close, I'd be surprised if anybody was ahead by 17 points at halftime, barring anything we can't predict. You
Right.
know how that goes. But assuming it's a close, compelling game, I just think that O-line becomes such a big factor in the third and fourth quarter.
I agree. All right. This has been fantastic. He is Greg Cosell. Greg, for being such a special guest, we're going to give you a free bag of Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants coming
Wow,
right
that's a
at
lot of
you.
stuff.
I know.
That's a
I
lot
have
of
it
stuff.
memorized. Impressive,
Wow,
right?
wow, really good.
Thanks for being here, man.
Hey,
Appreciate
thanks.
you.
Appreciate it.